This video is brought to you by Squarespace. What's up, MetaNerds? This video will be a follow-up on something mentioned in the Nikto species vid, focusing on the possible connections of the Nikto gangs and Kaltho the Hutt. In this research, there's a ton of other cool connections, and it helps to give a more complete picture of the state of the underworld, with Hutts vying for power, and how it will lead to the Nikto that conquered the underworld, Rinriven Dai, seen as the successor to the Hutts. So this symbol is said to be the K from Huttese, and most Niktos speak Huttese, while the group is also called the Kintan Striders. So the K could just stand for that, but I hope you'll see why there's a strong reason to suspect that this is a connection to Kaltho, and even if you're still unsure, this deep dive really gives a great look at what a genius Hutt looks like, and how they operated during the times of the Empire, and into the times of chaos after 4 ABY. Of course, when Jabba died, it left a power vacuum, quickly filled by Bib Fortuna, and the Hutts maintained power by owning all the income-producing assets like spice mines and spaceports that were outside of the law. Hutts lived for around 1,000 years, and Kaltho was one of the most powerful during the Galactic Civil War. This info comes from the Jewel of Yavin, which is a part of the Star Wars role-playing guides, so while the events that your character might undertake are not canon, these books are filled with canon lore to help build out the story. And they're used to give us lore on everything from weapons, species, planets, vehicles, and history. All kinds of stuff comes from these RPG guides. In this, Kaltho is mentioned 62 times, with the paragraph that introduced him being labeled Mysterious Benefactor. A bit too perfect for this theory that he's secretly pulling strings. Kaltho was on Bespin for the auction of the Jewel of Yavin, one of the rarest gemstones in the galaxy. Mostly for a status symbol, though it did have practical industrial uses, much like gold and diamonds do. But this was such a unique and outstanding specimen that it drew out the wealthiest people in the galaxy, becoming a whole star-studded event on Bespin, with Kaltho and his crew renting out the entire 15th floor of the Yarith, the prestigious hotel of the floating city. More evidence of Kaltho's wealth and power is that the auction was at an event for the elite, and it did everything to try and keep commoners out, to the point that just finding an invitation is a major part of this role-playing mission. We learn that Kaltho's legitimate source of wealth is through being from one of the Elder Khajiitics, the family business/gangs, and he owns the largest and busiest spaceports, as well as private loading docks all over the galaxy, but especially on Nar Shaddaa, the smuggler's moon located right above Nal Hutta, the capital of the Hutt Empire. So this Hutt, who most of us have never heard of, owns the economic gates to the Hutt's most lucrative world. All trade coming to and fro on Nar Shaddaa has to come through a port, so by being the king of the ports, he must have seen himself as the de facto king of Nar Shaddaa. And how could he not be one of the most powerful Hutt individuals? He had many legitimate businesses in the field of shipping, heavy manufacturing, arms dealing, and the spice trade. The Hutts had long known how to play Republic laws, and spice has many legal, therapeutic applications. So when some outfit was caught turning it into illegal spice, they just have some patsy take the fall. You might have noticed that those are all elements for a private army. Heavy machinery and shipping allows you to own armadas of ships and vehicles. That combined with spice mines allow him to have a whole medical wing, and access to industrial explosives. And then of course there's the arms company. So even what is all legally registered is hilariously obviously pointing towards Kaltho's private military. And then there are the countless private spaceports he owns across the galaxy, essentially working as bases. And that's without any speculation into the nefarious things he was doing illegally. As a powerful VIP, he moves like a head of state, with a retinue of guards, spies, and bounty hunters preventing any assassination attempts. The player sees that there is also a massive parade of entertainers and attendants following him all across Cloud City, while his palanquin is equipped with his own personal deflector shield. And Kaltho is known to shut down the top eateries around Bespin, much to the ire of the lesser rich who couldn't keep up with him. Many of his guards are Nikto, and although that's pretty standard, it is interesting to note that when he landed on Cloud City, he went out of his way to have his chief enforcer, a human, lead these Nikto enforcers around Cloud City, where it is cryptically stated that they were, quote, tasked with putting the fear of Kaltho's empire into the locals while the Hutt was in port. Everything in this book stresses the reach, wealth, power, and intelligence of Kaltho, as opposed to the hedonistic and sensitive Jabba, whereas Kaltho had a reputation for a sharp mind, always plotting and conniving to the point that an old Jedi in exile here was worried about his intel gathering abilities, and she personally knew of his powerful reputation from the smuggler's moon. A sentiment shared by a casino mogul taking part in the auction, who dedicated his staff to monitoring all the movements of Kaltho, terrified that his own advisors would be turned against him, and that Kaltho had the credits and pull to rip the casinos out from under him. And of all the other bidders invited, the Imperial Security Bureau agent says that her, quote, respect and caution is reserved for Kaltho. As more details reveal themselves, you get a lot of Thrawn vibes from him. He loves to study the art from all kinds of different cultures, always moving calmly and tactically. And when it comes to intelligence, he has a major domo that is a well-connected Bothan, connected to the Bothan spy network, which was regarded in a way as the greatest independent military force, usually exerting their will by collecting intel that brought everyone from politicians to generals to their knees. If you were a head of state and challenged them to war, you would wake up to headlines revealing your darkest secrets, or at least the secrets of anyone near you, conversations and movements against your own allies, even down to passwords and blueprints to private and military assets. A full-on cyber war that nobody was foolish enough to initiate. So that's the kind of person he has as his major domo. Another curious thing about Kaltho we find out is that he may be suffering from some disease that is slowly killing him. He is much smaller than he should be, still the normal length and height of an adult Hutt, but he seems to be rapidly losing weight. NISB reports show that Kaltho is aware his wasting away is striking and potentially damaging to his reputation. So he wears this big, bulky cloak made from the best Corellian nanosilk, which is decorated with scenes from Hutt history and mythology, of course with his symbol right in the front. The letter K representing his name, with this text along the side here seeming to spell Nishkal Fall. Comment down below if you see something here different or know what it means. My best guess is that it must be referencing some event or hero important to the Hutts. Like if a human had a cloak with the fall of Rome or Adam and Eve's fall, something like that, but I haven't found a word like Nishkal in the lore. ISB reports also say that his take from the legal businesses is said to be several 100,000 credits a day. That he far outbid everyone else for that jewel at 200,000. And keep in mind that may sound great in our dollars, but Star Wars prices are strange in that some things like food actually seem more expensive, but things like a TIE fighter only cost 60,000 credits. An Imperial Star Destroyer was only 150 million. So if he was making around 300k a day, in a single year he could have built up quite the force. Combine that with his long lifetime and the fact that in studying his movements across Bespin, they find that Kaltho was secretly behind everything from political offices to racers in the Cloud City Grand Prix. And like any good mob boss, part of his success was in working with the authorities. He was an ISB informant willing to snitch on anybody if he and his Bothan spy network advisor came to the conclusion that this was the best path forward, using every tool available to them. If you watched our Nikto species vid, you saw how the Hutts always found a way to manipulate this species, and of course were the true lords of countless smaller gangs, where even if their thugs didn't know a Hutt was the leader, that leader knew that they could never actually cross the Hutt. And after 4 ABY, this was the most chaotic area in the galaxy for many lifetimes, even Hutts, as the authoritarian empire at least had some order, and even during the Clone Wars most places were under the rule of either the CIS or Republic. At all times, there was some stronger central authority than what you find in 9 ABY, 5 years after the Battle of Endor, where a lot of regions really wanted to operate on their own, helpful at stopping tyranny in some of the more civilized places, but a lot of the more dangerous areas of space became more dangerous. And we see other Hutts like the twins trying to make a claim to Jabba's throne. It's funny that they both have gemstones put in their face. Perhaps this is what Kaltho was hoping to do with this incredibly coveted jewel, a symbol that he was the fitting ruler of Nal Hutta, a planet they called the Glorious Jewel. Though I do doubt that embedding it in his face is his style. He seems like he would want to display it somewhere by his throne or in some great museum with other works of art. And for thousands of years, since the time of the Old Republic up until now, everyone agreed that the Tuskens were bad for business. Their tribal structure and aversion to modern machines and vices meant that the Hutts couldn't get a credit out of these people. And even worse, they scared off the modern settlers that might be manipulated by the Hutts. I think it's reasonable to assume that these Nikto speeder gangs arose naturally from the death of Jabba, but they could have been funded and focused by Kaltho, who we know would have deep business connections with the Pyke Syndicate.
The Kintan Striders have already collected protection money,
as they were the kings of spice processing and distribution. But Kaltho also owned many spice mines and the safe harbors and legit shipping companies, which would all be used to move the spice around the galaxy. The twins were not powerful or respected Hutts, so we shouldn't be surprised at their simplistic forfeiture of Tatooine. And we know that this symbol is worn prominently on the most intelligent and conniving Hutt we've ever heard of, who was at his peak in the final years of the Empire, with no reason to believe he fell off in these few years, and that his financial success was intertwined with the Pykes, while also being the kind of Hutt that would work with the ISB to sell out other Hutts, and had a Bothan as his right-hand man. I think this all fits together, that he would help guide the Hutt ruling council to abandon Tatooine, while secretly shaping this world to be a profitable port in his network of smuggling, arms, and spice dealing. And in using Nikto gangs as a proxy, he would have come across the rising star in Revan Dai, who would eventually outmaneuver the Hutts and become the favored agent of chaos by the First Order. Perhaps by around 20 years later, Kaltho's disease finally killed him, and when Revan stepped up and was further empowered by all these First Order credits. So let me know what you think of all this. No matter what, I think this deep dive into Kaltho was fascinating. Comment down below what you think. And as for behind the scenes facts, all this comes from the book Edge of Empire, The Jewel of Yavin. Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, and be sure to check out the link down below for 10% off Squarespace. Squarespace allows you to connect with your audience and generate revenue through gated, members-only content, manage your members, send email communications, and leverage audience insights, all on one easy-to-use platform. Community is key to building your website, and their fully integrated commenting system supports threaded comments, replies, and likes. There are also third-party extensions that are great for e-commerce, like streamlined bookkeeping, product promotion, and inventory management, and can automatically push content from your social media channels. The best way to make your website the all-in-one hub you've dreamed of. So use the link in the description to go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, head over to squarespace.com/MetaNerdz to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. In the description, you'll also find links to our Patreon and PayPal. For just $1 a month, your name will go on this list, and special shout out to our $25 tier supporters, Bill Payne, Brandon Robinson, and Oscar Jones. But most important of all, remember, the vice-pushing aliens are secretly shaping everything, and the Force will be with you, always.